This is a Community Conversation 2025 Year in Review. Coming to you from the Univest Public Media Center in Bethlehem, PA, here's your host, Brittany Sweeney.
Good evening and welcome to a special year-end edition of a Community Conversation presented by PBS 39, WLVR Radio 91.3 FM, and LehighValleyNews.com. Tonight we reflect on 9 important episodes that aired throughout 2025. Stories that shape the Lehigh Valley and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, from the state of our schools to our healthcare system, to the future of public media and the nonprofits that support our most vulnerable neighbors. We covered a lot this year. Let's take a look back at some of the moments, voices, and ideas that defined 2025. We begin with immigration, one of the most urgent and emotional topics of 2025. Since taking office in January, President Trump put the fight for tighter immigration regulations at the top of his to-do list. Headlines surrounding ICE raids and undocumented immigrants have dominated news cycles all year. We look back now at the conversation we had with local lawyers and advocates to understand the topic. According to U.S. law, being in the country without authorization is a civil violation, but those who enter without permission can face criminal charges. And there are pathways for people to come to the country legally. To break that down and to take a closer look at immigration law, we are joined now by attorney Ray LaHood from LaHood Law Group in Allentown, Muhlenberg College Spanish professor Erica Sutherland, who is part of the organization Grupo de Apoyo, an immigrant support group, and attorney Mike Renison from Lehigh Immigration in Bethlehem. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Mike, let's start with you. We just kind of broke it down there. It's a civil offense to be here undocumented, but there are some lines there that you can cross into the criminal territory. So is it legal to be here undocumented or illegal?
Well, I think like the term legal and illegal are sort of misused, because to be here without lawful status doesn't mean that you're a criminal. I mean, you're basically here without fulfilling a civil immigration law, but that doesn't necessarily imply that you're a criminal. And I think there's been a lot of blurring lines, especially lately with politics, where people are basically saying if you're here without lawful status, you're a criminal. And I think that's obviously a gross overcharacterization. I mean, millions of people are not criminals. They're not actively committing crimes. So I think that's a very scary thing to hear people in positions of power saying.
Erica, you're working with a lot of these people. Where is that line? Are you hearing people say, as we just heard Maribella say, that she is worried that people think they're criminals? Are you hearing that from the folks that you work with?
Absolutely. There's a lot of fear in the community, a tremendous amount of fear. And I actually have to second what Mike has said about just that whole notion of illegality. And particularly with the new administration coming in, they're changing the rules, they're changing the definitions, and now everyone who's not a legal permanent resident, almost by default, is being called a criminal, which doesn't make sense at all. There's a huge spectrum of legality or lawful presence. If you are in status, for example, applying for a domestic violence humanitarian visa, well, these things don't happen overnight, but until you get that visa approved, at this point you're considered illegal when actually you're in the process of applying for something. Political asylees, again, that's a process that can take a very long time. And while you're in process, you used to be considered an immigrant, someone who is there in status, but not a permanent status, and that whole notion of a permanent, impermanent status. There's also the notion of how you come into the country in the first place. If you come in with inspection, passing through immigration, you are in a different category than if you come without inspection. Here in the Lehigh Valley, the vast majority of the immigrant community, be it documented or undocumented, came in on an airplane, came in with a visa. And so those who have fallen out of status overstayed the visa for whatever reason or in whatever way. And I think that, again, is something that's important to understand. If you came in with a visa, it's actually much easier to adjust your status given certain supports and certain conditions. what we are hearing in the community is people are saying, well, what am I? I'm waiting for this. I've been waiting patiently. I've been doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and yet now I'm being called a criminal. People are panicking.
Sure, we're going to get more into that. But Ray, as we were going down some of the numbers earlier in the program, you said those numbers seem drastically low.
They are.
So what
Absolutely.
are some of the estimations of undocumented people here in the Lehigh Valley versus the state?
Absolutely. I do want to kind of just touch
Sure.
base on what was said here. I mean, there is, I believe, an agreement among immigration practitioners and judges and like that. Those that are in a process or in proceedings are, seeking protection of the Violence Against Women's Act or political asylum and are going through a process. I mean, they're still, what they have been defined as in the past hasn't changed. Maybe culture has changed it and called them, criminals or the like. So that's still there. There's still that level of protection there while they go through that process.
The public rhetoric doesn't match that.
Well, the public rhetoric isn't the law, though, and that's just
true.
the fact of the matter. And just one more thing, if I could, too, is,
Sure.
The crossing of the border. I mean, the physical crossing of the border. And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but the physical crossing of the border, if seen by a Customs and Border Protection agent, and they can identify it, and it was seen then, it actually is considered a crime.
A crime,
So, it's, and I'm not saying it should be. I'm not saying it is, but there is it's considered a federal crime. But to prove that you've violated that, you'd literally have the person from CBP seeing you, watching you walking across the border. So in essence, they're going back to that.
Living in a standard dorm room
I am first-generation student.
on a typical U.S. college.
I am studying international studies.
Marbella Ramos is in her second semester at a Lehigh Valley school.
Here I am, just trying to accomplish my goals and make my parents proud. During the summer, I worked almost 50 to 60 hours per week so I could earn some money and saved all that money for college.
The 18-year-old is tackling her full-time course load and earning money to put herself through school, but her stress goes beyond that of a typical college student.
My parents are undocumented. My dad is from Guatemala and my mom is from Honduras.
Tell me about your parents.
So my parents immigrated here almost 2 decades ago.
Did they say it was dangerous, or they don't really talk about it?
They have told me many stories about it. They have told me that even the toughest guys, the toughest looking guys even cried during the process. It was only 2 weeks, but for them it felt like really an eternity because there was no food, no water.
Her parents could face deportation at any moment. The freshman was born in the United States, granting her birthright citizenship, which is at risk due to an executive order signed by President Trump.
Honestly, we can't do anything about it for now. So I'm just working hard as a college student. And when I turn 21, I really hope to sponsor them because definitely they have worked hard. My dad is working a lot of overtime right now, so it's he's working almost 12 hours per day, and even Sundays. He loves working so much because he says if I'm not working, then there's no support in this house, so that's his mentality.
Yeah.
Her father is a coal miner in northeastern Pennsylvania and has been for more than a decade, while her mother stays home looking after Marbella's 16-year-old sister. She says they fled their countries out of fear.
There's a lot of danger. All these gangs and all that stuff that manipulate the president. It's just so many corruption. We cannot solve anything. People are feared from the gangs because they kill, they do so many stuff and torture the people.
Now, after more than 20 years in this country, her family fears being separated under the latest immigration crackdowns.
I don't want people to think that we're criminals. We just want better lives here, so yeah.
With more than 2 years until she turns 21, the college student says she's feeling the pressure of paying for college, earning a degree, and worrying about her parents' safety.
I hope everything goes well, even though we're going through hard moments right now with all this immigration stuff, but I hope that everything goes well. I just really hope that I could sponsor my parents soon.
In the meantime, she says she plans to continue saving for school and preparing for the day that she can legally fight for her family.
We're a community, and we really hope that even though we're in this process, we just hope that so there could be some change in like the policies and things like that, because definitely we're not criminals at all. We just want a better life, and we just want to work hard towards our goals and just be happy as everyone else.
During that community conversation, Immigration Close to Home, we also spoke to area superintendents about how students are being impacted by the immigration crackdown in schools. The full episode can be streamed on YouTube/PBS39. And speaking of schools, another topic that seemed to be talked about throughout the year is the education system. As parents, teachers, and lawmakers debated funding, access, and the future of post-pandemic learning, our show dedicated an entire episode to understanding our education system and the impact made over the past year through government changes. I will open the conversation up here with our superintendents. What are you seeing firsthand? We're in the first month or so of school starting. What are you seeing firsthand in your districts as it pertains to the dismantling of the Department of Education? Jack, if you'd like to start.
A lot of uncertainty. We know that over the summer, we've developed the academic programs, hired the staff with the anticipation that the funding streams that contribute to a school district budget would be there. Over the summer, when we saw some federal clawbacks, we saw some conditional funding, and in addition to the state's budgets being uncertain, it sort of holds us in place. So that uncertainty does cause delay. It does cause reduced opportunities for students as we hedge our bets in an uncertain future.
What are some of those programs? What are some examples of those programs that are federally funded that may go away if those funds aren't there?
A perfect example will be Title III, which generally serves students who are English language learners. In Bethlehem, that's over 1,200 students, and the support of them and their families requires language services, language guides, certain assistive technology, certain curricular materials, professional training of both English language teachers and regular ed teachers. That's all up in the air right now. So the students still have the needs, they still have language learning needs, but our ability to forecast where we're going to be able to afford those supports is still uncertain.
Tracy, are you feeling that uncertainty as well in Easton?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know, right now our kids are in school and learning and doing very well. Our schools are quiet and productive, but behind the scenes we are looking every day at what programs can we afford, how many teachers can we afford to keep on, what support systems can we afford to keep on. You know, as was mentioned earlier, Easton and Bethlehem, Allentown alike are all very diverse communities with, you know, we're about 47 different languages spoken there. And so when you talk about multilingual or ESL education, it's not just about our Hispanic population, which is by far our largest population of non-English speakers, but you know, to program for them appropriately at the various levels that they come into our school system is a challenge, not knowing what our funding will be for that, and then how to reprioritizing the funding that we do have so that we are not leaving students behind based on any demographic that they may experience.
Sure, and Aaron, I'm going to bring you into this. How might all of this, the lack of federal oversight on education, what might that do, or how might that impact teachers across the state?
Well, it's a really scary situation, because this is a plan that was not well thought out, quickly enacted. That way it can be they can quickly dismantle the Department of Education. And unfortunately, what we're going to see is a lot of uncertainty. Is the $1.6 billion that Pennsylvania sees annually, is that money going to be coming to Pennsylvania? And obviously, you know, this is money that, as we've heard earlier, goes for special education. We have so many students in Pennsylvania. It's gone up, you know, 5%, from 15% to 20% in the last little bit more than a decade, who receive special ed services in Pennsylvania. And, you know, we need to be providing them with as many services as possible, but without that $1.6 billion, what's going to happen? We've heard about the title services. These are affecting our communities that have high poverty. And of course, we need to be investing more money into these communities that have high poverty. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And unfortunately, it's our kids that are going to be losing out in the end. We're going to have higher class sizes, and that's just not something that our kids deserve. Our kids deserve all the resources they can possibly get.
Sure. Are you hearing from teachers that they're worried?
Well, I was hearing it earlier in the calendar year that this was, they read the playbook. They knew what was coming. This is something that the administration told everybody was going to happen. And sure enough, The dismantling has begun, and we have educators from every corner of the state. We have support staff from every corner of the state. They're really worried. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to our students? They're the ones that we care about so much, and we want to make sure that they have every opportunity.
It feels like we're packing them up and putting them on the curb. It feels like we're kicking them out. That's a really hard pill to swallow. They're children.
Say cheese. Say cheese.
A safe, loving environment that supports educational growth.
So what two colors we're making that? Red and yellow. Ooh, shiny.
That's what parents look for in their child care provider.
And once she started coming here, I've noticed like a change in her speech.
And although Ashley Barker is juggling parenting and earning a degree, she knows what comes first.
My daughter is just the most brightest, energetic, smartest little girl.
The Whitehall mom just completed the Diagnostic Medical Sonography program at Northampton Community College and is taking classes to learn more about healthcare administration. She says the last 2 years of school were possible because she had reliable child care for her 4-year-old Shiloh at the Reedman Hall Family Children's Center. The facility not only offers full-time child care services, but serves as a classroom for early education students on NCC's main campus in Bethlehem.
There were times where I had classes from 10 to 3. Like, what would I have done? I don't have family that live close. Most of my family actually live far away, so it was just nice to have that option.
Up to this point, the cost of Barker's childcare has been covered by a grant.
Our Pell Grant recipients on any of our campuses are able to obtain a child care grant in order to continue their studies and have their children here at one of our child care facilities.
But that free care is quickly coming to an end.
We are looking at multiple families that by September 30th, that will be their last day.
Wait for your breath. Whoa.
Being that it's being taken away at the end of the month, it also has me like in a, sort of like in a panic because this is very abrupt for it to be taken away.
We've been really fortunate over the last 20 years to hold this funding and to work in conjunction with the Department of Education to provide this for families. And it's built up to be about 25% of our families combined on both our Pocono campus and our main campus who have received this funding.
Nicole Rooney says the main campus has about 80 children enrolled in the program. Just as the semester started, the announcement came that federal child care grants for Pell Grant recipients will end.
To have to go to them, as a parent myself, have to go to them and say, hey, I know that you're trying. We know here that you are trying so hard. And this is it. And we're gonna try, we're gonna figure it out, but we don't have a definitive answer for you. And we gotta take it one step at a time. And it's a lot of uncertainty. It was hard. It was really devastating. I'm so sorry. It was incredibly devastating.
The loss of funding creates barriers for students that Rooney says could lead to dropped classes or the inability to work.
Just as some of these parents, they're here because they escaped such horrible past lives, I'll call them. You know, some of them are even here from other countries, and this is their start, and they have children in tow, and they're truly, truly trying to make better lives for their children. And every time they take a step forward, lately it feels like 2 steps back, so.
She says the college is working with community funders to provide temporary support.
We are trying our hardest to rally the community as quickly as possible. We are trying to get our lawmakers and our representatives to pay attention. We don't need them to pay attention a year from now. We need them to pay attention right now.
The facility, which is already offering under-the-market childcare rates, serves as a critical safe space for both children and parents, many of whom face additional challenges like food insecurity and housing issues.
It made me very sad. I actually was very emotional when Nicole told me that, because I just thought about, like, what if I was starting the program now and I find out that, oh, the grant is being taken away. I wouldn't know what to do. I would probably have to pull back on my education because I won't have any daycare assistance. I won't be able to afford it.
That episode, The Changing Landscape of Education, captured what educators were feeling: uncertainty, frustration, but also hope. Our guests emphasized that even in a challenging year, teachers and administrators continued to adapt in extraordinary ways. Next, we shift our focus to health, and specifically the findings of the 2025 Pennsylvania Health Survey. It was conducted by the Muhlenberg College Public Health Program and the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion. Researchers interviewed Pennsylvanians this past spring on everything from healthcare access to immunizations, mental health, and the political landscape. For that, we sat down with Christopher Borick, a professor of political science and the director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion.
We've been doing this survey now since 2013. It's part of our ongoing outreach in Pennsylvania to study issues. We do it with our public health program at Muhlenberg, and every year we go out and interview Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth regarding these issues. It's largely by cell phone, so we have conversations, interviews with these Pennsylvanians, and we ask them an array of questions. Some of the questions we ask every single year. We repeat them to see how things might be changing among Pennsylvania residents. Other questions are timely that we add based on what's going on in the world. What kind of health issues are playing out? What kind of topics are key? And so this year we once again, without this spring, talked to over 500 Pennsylvanians and got some really interesting findings on issues that we think are salient for the state.
Sure. What are some of the key findings that really stuck out to you as different than years past?
Well, we ask questions on broad health topics, for example. How are people feeling about health care in the state? How are they feeling about their own personal health, their mental well-being? And we did see this year a little bit of a downward trend in how people evaluate both the overall health care they receive and their overall health. And that's an interesting shift. You know, it's not dramatic. I think most Pennsylvanians still think they get good health care. Most Pennsylvanians still rate their overall health and mental health pretty positively. But compared to last year and the last few years, we've seen a bit of a step back in terms of those overall evaluations of individual health and health care.
Sure, and one of the key findings in that point was the cost of health care.
Yeah, so one of my favorite questions that we ask every year is an open-ended question. What do Pennsylvanians think are the biggest issues facing health and healthcare in the Commonwealth? And this year, when people in their own words told interviewers, the most common things are cost and access. These in the area of health policy have always been challenges. Can you get access to health care? How much and how affordable is that care? And when individuals in the state were telling interviewers what they thought was the biggest challenge, those words came over time and time again: access, affordability.
The results were clear. Pennsylvanians remain deeply concerned about access, affordability, and mental health supports. And as we learned from our guest, public health and public policy are tightly intertwined. To read more about the 2025 Pennsylvania Health Survey, visit LehighValleyNews.com. Continuing on the topic of health, the community conversation that received the most engagement from our in-studio audience and on YouTube Live was one on the stage of a woman's life that doesn't always get talked about: menopause. We welcomed a group of women into the studio to discuss what others need to know about navigating this often taboo topic. Here's a snippet of the conversation with some of our audience members.
Education for women is absolutely severely lacking. No doubt about that. Since menopause affects people in a woman's life, spouse and kids, What kinds of education is needed for them to help support her? And seeing how difficult it is to even get women educated on this, educating the family may be even more of an uphill struggle. Is there any work being done to help educate those in the women's circle?
I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think sometimes a forgotten piece of this story. And I do think that, just to be open and transparent about sort of the biology and the physiology, and that this, especially I think some of the mood issues can sometimes come out at home, or, sleeping issues, I think just to sort of call it what it is, and for the folks in the family to be aware of what's happening and supportive, of the woman, both getting information, getting therapy, getting support as they, transition in this process.
Sure. Shonda, what do you tell families, husbands or significant others of people who are going through this?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I appreciate having a man in the audience. I say approach it with compassion, curiosity, and a little bit of caution. Just to be aware of that. But show them that you want to be supportive, ask the questions, and say, is it okay if I share what I'm noticing? If she's not quite aware of what's going on yet, and the partner is more so, sometimes they notice before we notice what's going on and the changes. So, but delicately, and know that we're on the same team. This is not about fixing you. There's nothing wrong with you. I really want to support you in getting the treatment that you deserve.
Sure. Dr. Friel, I want to get back to the basics of menopause and why this happens. Why are we feeling some of those symptoms like night sweats or getting really hot or, the brain fog as everybody describes it? Why do these happen?
Right. So, what's happening physiologically essentially is that the ovary, prior to menopause, it does this beautiful dance of hormonal production with a combination of estrogen, progesterone, and we have estrogen receptors all over our body. And once we go through menopause and we no longer have our period, the ovary essentially really diminishes its production of estrogen. And it's really the lack of estrogen in our bodies that's causing these symptoms. And, it's interesting because the other thing to remember is part of the menopause process is also the aging process. And sometimes it can be hard to figure out what's actually being caused by low estrogen levels versus what's being caused by getting older. And maybe it's a combination of both.
Sure. And so how does this stage of life impact a woman's overall health moving forward as she does age? Menopause and aging go hand in hand, especially when it comes to bone density or heart disease. How does that all play in?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things to think about, and how I really try to approach this with patients is, I don't like the word menopause because it sort of sounds like we're stopping, but I do like the idea of pausing and really taking account of what you're feeling in the moment as far as the menopause transition and how that can be managed, but then thinking about long term and what can I do to think about my health 20, 30, 40 years down the road. I also don't like the term anti-aging, but I really like the term anti-frailty, and that speaks to what can I do now to help my bones 40 years from now, what can I do now to help my heart 40 years from now, as well as my brain. Some of that is hormone dependent, and some of it is lifestyle, which is, I think, so important. And if the menopause transition can be like a wake-up call for women to say, oh my gosh, I see my body is changing. Let me figure out how to manage my symptoms now, but let me get educated and think about how I can prepare for the future in the long run. And some of that might be hormonal, management, but it's a lot of other things too.
Sure, so this is a marathon here, not a sprint.
It's a marathon, absolutely.
That was Dr. Kristen Friel, an obstetrician gynecologist from Lehigh Valley Health Network, along with menopause mentor and psychotherapist Shonda Morales, joining us for that conversation. That show also includes menopause stories from women of varying backgrounds and can be found on the Community Conversations section of the PBS 39 YouTube page. Now we move on to our most viewed episode of 2025, which explored the future of local journalism and public broadcasting. The financial foundation of public media nationwide and across Pennsylvania came under attack as a $9.4 billion rescissions package was approved, clawing back approximately $1.1 billion in previously approved funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or CPB, the funding stream that supports NPR, PBS, and over 1,500 local stations. Our episode, Broadcast in the Balance, featured an interview with National Public Radio CEO Catherine Maher as we asked what happens to democracy when trusted local news disappears. Catherine, let's start with the big picture. How significant is CPB funding to NPR and the public radio ecosystem across the country? How does it all work?
Well, it is a little complicated, so do please bear with me. But the critical thing to know is that CPB funding is most essential for local public stations, whether television or radio. 70% of funding goes directly to local stations. At an organization like NPR, we represent less than 2% of funding allocated for radio. So really, this impact is direct to your local station. It is direct to the broadcasting, the reporting that happens, the support for cultural programming. And that's the sort of thing that we want our lawmakers to understand, is that this will directly impact their communities, it will directly impact jobs, and it will directly impact the ability of their constituents to know what's going on around them.
And so, Catherine, what would immediate or long-term cuts to CPB funding mean for local NPR member stations, particularly in those rural or underserved areas, especially some areas here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most immediate impact would be to rural communities, communities where local media as a whole has really diminished over the course of the last 2 decades. We've seen so many newspapers across the country go out of business. We recognize that 1 in 5 Americans lives in a news desert other than public media. And so if we start to see cuts to federal funding for public media, we will see stations that serve rural communities that do not necessarily have an economic basis for their service, but in fact are supported by federal funding. They may have to contract, they may have to lay off local journalists, or they may have to stop providing universal service. Right now, public radio reaches 99.7% of Americans across the country, including coverage for areas that are traditionally very difficult to be able to serve, places that don't currently have broadband access or even cell phone service. And yet we are always on and always available and always free. And so these impacts would really hurt rural communities. Anybody who does not pay to subscribe to a news service or television service, and that's what we're trying to fight against.
Sure, you're talking about local journalism. Oftentimes, NPR National partners with local stations to produce those in-depth local journalism pieces. So how could these funding cuts affect that collaboration and, by extension, the ability of communities to have access to that news source?
I mean, I think that this is one of the most important parts of what public radio does, is it supports nearly 3,000 local journalists across the country, people who are there with you covering education, covering your local economy, covering your state house, the decisions of state legislators, in ways that other outlets simply can't or won't. And certainly at the national level, there are very few national media outlets that actually have people in the state house, and that is something that we do every day, day in and day out. NPR has invested very heavily in working with local stations to make sure that we have collaboration with the reporting on the ground. You know your communities better than anyone, and we want to make sure that we're bringing your voices to the national conversation so that when something happens in the country, you're hearing directly from the people who it affects. We work with more than 6 regional newsrooms as well to ensure that communities that are underserved generally by news have access to information that's specific to their region, whether we're talking the Gulf states or whether we're talking the Mountain West, in order to make sure that issues that really matter, whether we're things like drought and water rights or things like severe weather events, are covered in ways that really respect and are sensitive to what's going on in your backyard.
The loss of those funds previously allocated by an act of Congress led to the closure of the CPB after 58 years, along with the loss of jobs at public media outlets across the country. And in some cases, the cuts led to entire operations shuttering. However, from political polarization to dwindling newsroom resources, this episode reminded us that local journalism is essential infrastructure. It ensures coverage of school boards, public health, elections, stories that shape our daily lives. Public media nonprofits are not the only ones feeling the pinch. Many of the biggest challenges of 2025 were felt most intensely by organizations providing food, housing, counseling, and stability. With funding cuts and increased demand, the Valley faced difficult decisions. They recently talked about those decisions on our community conversation, When the Funding Fades. Dawn, at Community Action, you're seeing this firsthand. What are you seeing in terms of federal funding cuts and what they're doing to your programs and the people you serve?
Well, we have seen millions of dollars be cut in the past several months. We have tried to figure out how to pivot and how to do more with less. We've had to cut staff. We've had to cut programs. And so we're trying to continue to serve the community without too much of an impact on the people that we serve.
Sure. What are some of the programs that you offer through Community Action Lehigh Valley that get government funding?
Well, our largest is Second Harvest Food Bank, which distributed about 16 million pounds of food last year. We saw various cuts to our senior boxes, to programs that serve the 200 some pantries that we engage with, and with the federal cuts that have happened, we have seen quite a significant increase in the need and decrease in what we were able to initially get out to folks.
Sure. And what are we talking about here when we say that federal funding has been cut? Is this, a couple dollars here and there, or are these substantial grants?
I would say it's been about $2.5 to $3 million worth of funding that we were able to partner with local farmers, that we were giving dairy and protein and eggs and milk out to the pantries that we serve. And those farmers are feeling an impact as well, because we used to purchase from them directly and then distribute those supplies out to the various pantries that we work with, which are seeing about a 40% increase.
Sure. And Community Action also has some sheltering or housing funds that they give out as well. How's that been impacted?
Well, we see our 6th Street shelter in Allentown. It's the largest family shelter in the region. We do not get a lot of federal funding for the 6th Street shelter, however. But we are seeing more families facing homelessness. So that is where it impacts us, because the more families we see, we have to, have supplies for those families while they're getting back on their feet.
Absolutely. Mark, I want to bring you into this. New Bethany does some of the similar programming to Community Action when it comes to serving the unhoused and offering some type of sheltering assistance as well as food. What are you seeing firsthand at New Bethany?
Well, we're seeing a lot more people come into our meal center. We have a drop-in center. We do a lunch a day. We're seeing 140 people every day now. And for context, before the pandemic, we would see 50 to 60 people. And so 140 is quite a bit. This last summer, it was more like 80 or 90 people. And so to see that sort of spike in just the last 4 to 6 weeks is a really big deal. So we have seen homelessness on the rise. There is definitely a homelessness crisis in the Lehigh Valley right now. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about a really wonderful program that happened during the pandemic, sponsored by the federal government, but the federal government supported what I would just call a homeless prevention program. So you provide rental assistance or financial assistance to families who are just having trouble making ends meet. And over the time since the pandemic, and especially just in the last 6 to 8 months, that funding has gone down significantly. So we are seeing programs where we can help people stay in their homes, really almost be practically eliminated. So now some local sources, some like city government, federal government, or city government and state government have been supportive of these programs, because we know that prevention works, but not on the federal level. We're not seeing that too much anymore.
And I want to make a point that these are not just people who have continuously been unhoused. A lot of times it's people who are working paycheck to paycheck that all of a sudden something, a car payment, that kind of thing. It's our friends, it's our neighbors. Right. Are you seeing that firsthand?
So I get phone calls from people who ask about our food pantry. What is it like to go to the food pantry? I've never never used a pantry before. And so, especially in light of recent SNAP decisions that have been made, either to change the regulations or when there was the actual federal stoppage for that moment of time during November, we saw more people just showing up, and we ask, are you here because of the SNAP benefits? And over 50% of the people that come to our pantry say, yes, that's why we're here.
That conversation was one of the most emotional of our season. Nonprofit leaders shared stories of families struggling to stay afloat and the community support that helps sustain them. Those same agencies are the ones that support another growing crisis in the Lehigh Valley, one that's often hidden in plain sight, affecting hundreds of men, women, and families in both Allentown and Bethlehem. Shelters are full, encampments are being cleared, and local leaders are working to find lasting solutions. We began our year looking at the issue of homelessness, only to revisit the issue this past fall as the housing situations changed locally. So who are the people that are experiencing homelessness? In our first community conversation of 2025, Unhoused in the Lehigh Valley, we hit the streets in Bethlehem to meet some of our unhoused neighbors and find out how they got where they are today.
At first glance, the tarps sticking out of the brush under the Hill to Hill Bridge in Bethlehem go unnoticed.
I've been out here since 2020.
Unnoticed, just like the people who call those tarps home.
Those who need to know and understand homelessness, they need to come out here sometime and actually see it for themselves.
Christine Basso is one of those people.
You're out in elements every day, whether it's hot, cold, raining, snowing.
On this frigid January day with temperatures in the single digits, we talked to Basso, gloveless and wearing 2 heavy sweatshirts, about how she got here.
It's hard getting into a place when you don't have a check every month, and there's a long list for housing.
The Tatamy native showed us around her camp, where she's been living for nearly 5 years.
This one's mine. Right now I don't have no light inside because of the fact that I need to charge stuff, need to charge lights along with my phone and my other devices. That tent is a storage tent, okay? With Eric being behind me, his tent is insulated and he keeps it warm. But see, with mine, it's too big to keep warm, so he has me staying with him in his tent for me to keep warm because of my health problems I have with the asthma, the allergy problems. I am a breast cancer survivor, and I also am a colon cancer survivor. So, and all the other health problems, I learned to deal with it.
She says those health problems limit her ability to travel to seek shelter or food.
We go to soup kitchens, but it's on weather like this, you don't want to walk in it.
For many people who are unsheltered, walking is their only form of transportation. But without proper footwear, some in this situation end up with feet problems, like David Mayers.
David, you want to come over to the couch maybe and I can work on your dressing?
Oh, for walking on it, I got a blister. We always having the sneakers or boots on or whatever I had on, and not having a clean area to be able to give it the proper medical attention, it got infected and went down to the bone.
Oh, it's looking really good.
Mayers, who grew up in Allentown, is also experiencing homelessness. He has not had a place to live for the past few years.
After me and Mom got in fights here.
For the time being, he's in a medical respite program while his foot heals.
Healing nice now, but anything could happen. It could be going good 1 minute and be bad the next.
Once he's given a clear bill of health, he says he too will be back on the streets.
Good, no fever.
Biggest challenges in the cold is keeping warm because I have epileptic seizures. So when I get too cold, I go into seizures. That's my biggest challenge. When it's cold at night, I go to the YMCA, the warming station. All you gotta do is walk in and give them your ID, and they'll run your name, make sure you don't have no warrants or nothing like that. And if they have a bed, they'll give you a bed. There are a couple rules you gotta follow, but they'll give you a bed and at least have a warm place to stay and some help.
During that episode, we were joined by the mayors of the 3 major cities in the area. Mayor Reynolds, let's start with you. So what does homelessness look like in Bethlehem?
I think it's the same thing it looks like throughout the Lehigh Valley, and it takes many faces. You have people that are homeless or unsheltered, that have full-time jobs, that have part-time jobs, that are getting out of medical bankruptcy. You have people that are dealing with a variety of issues, but it all comes back to the same one. And the bottom line is people want to live in the Lehigh Valley, and right now we don't have enough housing for everybody. And we have successful programs with our Community Connections program, with our Health Bureau, and some of our partnerships with our nonprofits. But the bottom line is, with these 2, fantastic leaders to the right of me, the Lehigh Valley needs to be doing more across all 62 municipalities to be able to get to what the root of this problem is, which is housing instability caused by a lack of housing supply.
Sure, I want to get into that a little bit more, but Mayor Turk, what does homelessness look like in Allentown?
Yeah, similar to what Mayor Reynolds said, it looks like in the rest of the Lehigh Valley, which means that there's people at the center of it. So in Allentown, it's people like PQ, it's people like Susie, it's people like Vanessa, it's people that you must understand them and the challenges that they face, which are the challenges that we all face. It's the cost of housing that affects us. It's there's various different debts that we can find ourselves in. It's mental illness. It's substance abuse disorders, but fundamentally it's about people, and it's not just street homelessness. You mentioned the visibility of homelessness. It's people who you might not realize are living in either precariously housed or living without a house. And I think it's important to be clear about what those terms are when we talk about homelessness, when we talk about people who are living unhoused, and when we talk about people living unsheltered. They all look very different, but they're all very, very significant challenges to people in Allentown and across the Lehigh Valley.
Sure, different backgrounds, different genders, different cultures of people. Sure, Mayor Panta, what does it look like? Sorry, in Easton?
We face different challenges as well, because New Jersey is right across the border and they don't have any shelters in Warren or Hunterdon County. Hunterdon County is the 5th wealthiest county in the United States, and it does not have a homeless shelter. Our homeless shelters at capacity. Our goal there at Safe Harbor is to try to move them out, get them housed for short term, no more than 6 months, and get them educated if they need a GED, and then train them for an interview to get a job, and then move out. Right now we're building transitional apartments so that the people who move out of the homeless shelter can move into a transitional apartment for maybe 2 years as they get on their feet financially.
That was in January. Since then, the conversation has turned towards Allentown as the city clears out homeless encampments there. The situation is the catalyst for yet another show on homelessness in October. We're here along the Jordan Creek in Allentown, just near the Jordan Creek Greenway, and I am joined today by Allentown Council Member Cece Gerlach, as well as LehighValleyNews.com Allentown reporter Jason Addy. Thank you both so much for joining us for this conversation. And we're going to start today with Jason. As I just said, we're here along the Jordan Creek. This used to be an encampment for folks who were unhoused. Now it's a clearing. You don't see anything here. And so bring us up to speed. How did this become what we're seeing here today?
Right, so dozens, maybe up to more than 100 residents made this place their home in recent months and maybe dating back more than a year. In early August, Mayor Matt Turk ordered this camp to be shut down. He originally gave about 2.5 weeks for residents to get out. At that point, the city and the local United Way started talking about opening the YMCA's warming station early. It usually opens in mid-November. Those discussions began, and the mayor delayed the eviction here until September 29th, giving the Y just enough time to open. Bulldozers rolled in on September 29th, the morning of, and that night the Y's warming station opened. So it was just in time, but not everyone was able to go to the Y's warming station, and not everyone wants to.
In your reporting, what have you heard from the folks who are living here and the folks that are supporting the folks that live here?
Like I said, not a great percentage of them said that they were going to go to the Y right away. Some said that they were going to look for other places to set up their tents, and some inside Allentown, some already made the decision to leave the city. They felt that the pressure was clear that they would just be pushed out if they went somewhere else. So there's a lot of people still in flux right now because, you know, the Y isn't fully able to support everything.
At this particular location, there was also a lawsuit that was brought against the city. Can you tell me what you've learned about that during your reporting?
Sure. Maybe 200 yards away, the local landlord, Nat Hyman, owns an apartment building. He's filed suit this spring alleging that the city isn't doing enough to get people out of this area. He said that the people who lived here were affecting his property values by urinating on it and trespassing and other activities that were driving down his property values. He reached out to the mayor, he alleged, and got no response, so eventually he filed a lawsuit. Shortly after the city deemed this to be a flood risk, a fire chief came in and looked at FEMA flood maps and determined that people are living in a 100 to 500 year floodplain, and based on that information, the mayor said he decided to shut this down.
Thank you so much for sharing your reporting and for sharing this information with us. We're going to go over now to Councilwoman Cece Gerlach from the City of Allentown. Cece, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. Where do you stand right now on the homeless situation that's playing out in the city?
It's definitely a crisis, and it's a crisis that will only continue to grow. We have rents that are skyrocketing, food prices that are skyrocketing, the potential of food stamps being cut next month. Homelessness isn't going away. We will continue to see more and more people who you never would have thought would become homeless. You will continue to see them find themselves in situations like this.
Sure, and how did this situation play out in council when it came to clearing the camp down here near Jordan Creek and how to offer resources to these folks?
Yeah, you know, I think one point of frustration from people on council is that we were not made aware that this was going to happen. I was made aware by someone on the Commission on Homelessness. She told me that she was in a meeting with members of the administration and other service providers, and then I called a couple folks up on council and then mostly in the community, and next thing you knew, we had over 100 people show up to a council meeting to discuss this very topic.
Sure, and in our talking about the situation, you had said that some of the folks from this very camp had shown up to council. What did they have to say?
Yeah, I mean, some of the people that were living down here, they did show up, and as it's been covered, they feel like ghosts. They feel like they're not treated as humans. They feel like no one sees them. This, from their perspective, was not a floodplain. And then when you look at the map, it's not all a floodplain. So there was a lack of communication and understanding as to why their home had to be demolished and bulldozed.
Sure. So recently at council, you've introduced a new bill. What would that bill entail as it pertains to the unhoused community?
Yeah, it would make sure that whenever there is a sweep, in case there is a hazard, like an actual hazard in the future, that it would be done so with dignity and procedures. We do not have any internal or external, meaning legislation, in terms of how this happens. It's just, as I say, willy-nilly, and it's just arbitrary. And we cannot treat human lives like that. We cannot treat people's property like that. We cannot treat people's homes like that. We must have clear operating procedures as to what is deemable to be a hazard. We must try to mitigate that hazard instead of just immediately jumping to bulldoze people's homes. And we must make every effort to actually house people, because it ends up costing the city more money to just continue to sweep place after place with no clear solutions, rather than slow down, take our time, and do, if we're going to sweep an encampment, let's make sure that the people end up in a better situation than what they were, and then we won't have to sweep them somewhere else.
Since the recording of that interview, the city cleared another couple camps along the Jordan Creek. And finally, to close our year-end show, reflecting on the community conversations we've had in 2025, we close out with a piece of a conversation we can all relate to: traffic.
I think it's very heavy, especially 22.
The volume and the backups, basically, the volume is really bad at rush hour, so it takes you forever to get from point A to point B.
I think it's definitely picked up, probably in part due to the warehouses and the tractor trailer presence. I mean, they open up new jobs, so more people are moving up here. They're constantly building. You always see a Horton job site. Keystone Homes, everyone's building up here.
It's not bad at all. On most days going to work, I never feel like the road is congested. It's always smooth compared to like Philly or one of those towns across the street is usually a lot more congested. But here, it's not bad at all.
I realize that we need the trucks to give us all the shipment and stuff that we need to buy things. So I try to take that into account when I'm like, oh, there's so many trucks.
Many of those sentiments felt by others in the Lehigh Valley here. Well, generally, people seem to be annoyed by the traffic, but in some instances, traffic situations can cause anger and even lead to road rage, which is pretty scary. Here now to talk about behavior on the roads and the psychology behind it, our counselor Eric Droznak from Ellie Mental Health in Bethlehem Township, along with Teresa Pajeski, the Director of Legislative Affairs for AAA East Central. Thank you both for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Teresa, let's start with you. AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety's report, the Traffic Safety Culture Index, you've said it shows a public health crisis on roads.
Yes.
That's kind of what we're hearing now, so explain that for us.
Right. So what the Traffic Safety Culture Index found, and it's self-reporting, so people reported some dangerous behaviors. So we saw speeding, aggressive driving, and distracted driving as being the prevalent behaviors that people self-reported. So we see that as a public health problem, a public health issue because of that, because there are so many people who realize the dangers of driving distracted, of aggressive driving, and yet they have self-reported that they've done some of these actions in the past 30 days.
Sure, we're going to talk more about distracted driving and that kind of thing, but Eric, aggressive driving, road rage, it seems like we're hearing about it more and more, and like I said, it's scary. So why are we seeing this more, do you think?
Well, along with that public health crisis, and whether we're looking at our own national organizations, when we're looking at world organizations, we're looking at this huge mental health crisis. The reality is that life's stressful. Many of us are working 40, 50, 60 hours. We're commuting an hour, hour and a half one way. It's a lot of stress. The idea of an 8-hour workday gave us a third of a day at home, a third of the day at work, and a third of the day to sleep. Well, when you're working 10 hours, and then adding another 2 hours into that, you're really losing a lot of downtime. And in that, we're also losing connections because we all have work family. We use that term kind of jokingly, but because we spend so much time with these people. But we're not spending as much time with our family. We're not involved in bowling leagues, softball leagues. We're missing that interpersonal relationships to help us manage a lot of these stresses. And then all of a sudden, we find ourselves just full. And now we're in a situation where it's heavy traffic, I'm late, I gotta get to work, I gotta do more things, I gotta get home for this event, that event. We're exhausted, we're stressed, it's too much.
An analysis by LehighValleyNews.com found some stretches in the Lehigh Valley have experienced increases of 40% to 50% in traffic volume. Well, across our 9 episodes this year, certain themes emerged: funding instability, political polarization, uneven access to services. But we also saw collaboration, innovation, and resilience, from the arts to public health to economic recovery. 2025 was a year of challenge and also of possibility. These conversations didn't just highlight problems, they offered solutions. And they remind us of just how strong our community can be when we face issues together. Thank you for spending this hour with us, and thank you for supporting the mission of A Community Conversation. If you'd like to rewatch any of the full episodes, you'll find them on our PBS 39 YouTube channel. Please take a moment to subscribe and follow our upcoming shows in 2026. From all of us here at PBS 39, 91.3 WLVR, and LehighValleyNews.com, I'm Brittany Sweeney. Have a safe 2026 and good night.